Have you ever looked at someone you once cared for, even loved, and quietly thought, I don't think I'm that person anymore? Because sometimes the biggest relationship turning point isn't about who walked away, it's about who you have become. It's Susie here, and I want to welcome you back to the space where we talk about love, growth, and living emotionally awake in a world that's constantly changing. Today, we're diving into something deeply human, the identity shift. Because relationships don't just change when people move, when they argue, grow apart. They change when you start to grow, when your inner world starts to evolve. Sometimes it happens so naturally that you don't even notice it happening. Our lives move in seasons, and so do our hearts. When you go through healing, career transformation, loss, discovery, or personal awakening, your emotional chemistry with the world shifts as well. Attraction isn't static, it follows who you are becoming. And by the end of this episode, you will understand why your relationship patterns change when you change, and how to move through identity growth without feeling like you've lost yourself or lost relationships. Stay with us to learn how to take it to the next level. Welcome to Signals and Standards with Suzie, where we decode mixed messages, elevate your standards, and deliver practical insights that you can act on. I'm your empowerment coach, Suzie, here to guide you from confusion to clarity, helping you reclaim your power and create the relationships and life you deserve. Your identity is not fixed. It's part of a living, breathing, emotional landscape that continues to evolve. Think of identity as moving through natural seasons of psychological and emotional growth, a pattern explored in works that examines how self-concept evolves across life stages. For instance, some seasons feel open, warm, and socially energized, where connection, attraction, trust, friendship, they really seem easier and more natural. Other seasons in life are quieter and more reflective, asking you to step back, maybe heal from past hurts, or maybe do some therapy, maybe rethink some priorities, or even rebuild parts of yourself that may have been tired or hurt. Major life transitions often act as catalysts for identity restructuring. Whether it is a career pivot, a relationship change, a relocation, or a period of personal healing, it's not uncommon to experience the unsettling feeling of looking in the mirror and feeling slightly unfamiliar with the person you are becoming. Research on psychological transition states explains that humans move through phases of ending, neutral orientation, and some new beginnings as they adjust to various changes in their lives. So we adapt over time. But that temporary sense of disorientation is not a failure. It's not a loss either. In fact, it's often the nervous system and mind recalibrating as your internal sense of self evolves and reorganizes in response to new experiences. Also new beliefs, maybe your emotional needs, your relationships. Human beings are not designed to remain psychologically stagnant. As discussed in literature on theories of identity development, the self continues to evolve through relationships, evolves through learning, your experiences, also reflection. The idea that you must arrive at a final version of yourself is usually more pressure than reality, because the final version of yourself, you know what? It doesn't exist. For example, someone who once prioritized high-intensity social environments might later find more meaning in quiet, creative work or deeper one-on-one connections. Someone else might shift from chasing external validation through achievement toward valuing emotional balance and inner stability. I myself went from being very extroverted to somewhere in between extroverted and introverted. These internal shifts often influence attraction patterns and relationship compatibility. Psychological insights suggest that as individuals develop stronger self awareness, their relationship preferences may change alongside their personal growth. For instance, someone who spent years trying to keep peace by people pleasing might eventually feel exhausted by relationships that require emotional suppression. They may start feeling more comfortable setting boundaries, speaking directly, choosing environments where honesty is valued over constant accommodation. Relationship cycles, they're seasonal. You might experience periods where social life feels more lively and you enjoy shared experiences. You like that group energy, maybe even romantic excitement. At other times, you may naturally begin releasing connections that no longer support your development. This does not necessarily mean conflict exists. For instance, someone might notice they no longer enjoy late night social chaos because their priorities shifted towards maybe rest, relaxation, learning, or peace, or focused work. These subtle changes are often signs of maturation rather than disengagement. Emotional seasons also influence compatibility and decision making. During stress, burnout, your challenging or healing phases, your brain and body may prioritize safety and may want that predictability and that regulation over the novelty or intensity, the impulsiveness. You want the peace, right? Research explains that our emotional weather patterns, such as anxiety, recovery, or renewal, they can affect communication styles and intimacy expectations. Someone recovering from a difficult breakup might temporarily feel uncertain about dating, not because they're afraid of love, but because their system is learning what safety feels like again. Attraction itself is deeply connected to identity reconstruction. Academics have explored how people are often drawn toward others who reflect emerging aspects of their evolving self rather than past identity versions. For example, a person who once felt comfortable in emotionally unpredictable relationships might later find themselves more interested in partners who communicate calmly and consistently. Another example is a career-driven individual who previously valued constant productivity but later began prioritizing meaningful experiences, prioritizing themselves, their rest, their relaxation, their creative expression even. Identity shifts can also show up in everyday life. Someone might realize they no longer enjoy certain hobbies they once loved, or they might feel drawn to different music or conversations, or different friends or social environments. A person who used to enjoy large gatherings might begin preferring smaller, deeper conversations. Someone who chased external recognition might start finding satisfaction in personal mastery and helping other people grow. All that is okay. And it's okay if you still like the same things. It's okay if you change. It's all good. The shift doesn't mean withdrawing from love or relationships. Instead, it represents the maturation of emotional language and self-trust. When you learn new ways to understand yourself, to express your needs and set boundaries, you naturally begin to notice people who communicate in the same emotional style. For instance, dating after identity shift should include learning to recognize environments that support your emerging self rather than forcing yourself to fit outdated relational patterns. Same goes for careers. Once you've made that identity shift, maybe the job you've been doing is not really a good fit anymore, and you long for different challenges. So listen carefully to that quiet inner compass. You're not required to stay the same version of yourself in order to deserve love, belonging, or meaningful connection. Your life is not a finished photograph, but an unfolding story shaped by experience, reflection, and choice. Becoming more of who you truly are is not the enemy of love. It's often the pathway to recognizing relationships that feel healthier and more honest. Take care of your heart. Move gently through your emotional seasons and really stay curious about who you're becoming, because growth doesn't take love and relationships and friendships away. It helps you see where they truly live and what aligns with your values and what connections are meant to grow alongside you rather than hold you back. So let's take a breath for a moment. We've been talking about how identity shifts reshape emotional energy, boundaries, and what it feels like when your inner world starts asking for something different in relationships. You may already be thinking about people or patterns that feel aligned, or maybe those that don't anymore. And that's actually what growth often looks like. So let's bring this into real life with listener questions. Because identity evolution, it doesn't just live in theory, it shows up in how you communicate, what you do, who you're drawn to, and the emotional space you need as you become someone new. And if this episode stirred something in you, maybe you're noticing a shift in how you see yourself or your relationships, you don't have to sort it out alone. You can connect through powercoachsuzie.com, where many of these conversations begin with a simple, honest question you were brave enough to ask. So here is today's listener question. Does making a vision board actually help with identity and life transitions? And how can I do it in a meaningful way instead of just pasting random dreams on paper? That's a beautiful question, because a vision board is really a reflection of psychological and emotional direction rather than a collection of wishes. When we talk about an identity shift, we're referring to the natural process of becoming someone slightly different at different life stages. So research and coaching perspectives, they really suggest that identity isn't fixed. It evolves as experiences and relationships, self-awareness, self-respect, they deepen. Think of yourself as being in a continuous story rather than trying to reach a final version of who you are. One way to approach vision boarding is to focus on emotional identity rather than surface goals. The idea is inspired by the concept of emotional seasons of growth. These perspectives emphasize that people move through phases of warmth, reflection, release, and renewal. So when you choose images or words, ask yourself, which season of my life does this represent? For example, if you're moving through a period of healing or self-redefinition, your board might include symbols of stability. They might include clarity, strength, emotional safety, rather than just career or relationship or status markers. As we mentioned earlier, psychological research on the evolving self suggests that humans are not finished products. Our attraction patterns, hobbies, careers, and interests and relationship preferences often change as our identity reconstructs after major transitions. That means your vision board should not pressure you to lock into a single future. Instead, it should represent possibilities that feel emotionally congruent with who you're becoming. Another helpful lens comes from transition psychology, which explains that major life changes often include a period of disorientation before clarity emerges. So work on psychological transition that restructures your identity after a loss, after growth, after challenges, or maybe a change. So this is all normal process of growth and normal process of identity shifts. If your vision board feels confusing at first, that might mean that your brain is still processing your new direction. And that's okay. You can always move stuff around, but it tells you a lot, right? You might want to journal about it. When creating your board, start by asking 3 identity-centered questions. First, how do I want to feel when I wake up in the life I'm moving towards? Emotional satisfaction is strongly linked to relationships and life fulfillment. Second, what kind of person am I becoming in my communication, boundaries, and confidence? Because growth and personal development often influences attraction and compatibility with things and people. Third, what behaviors, environments, or relationships support this emerging version of me? So I'm going to read the 3 of them. First, how do I want to feel when I wake up in the life I'm moving toward? Second, what kind of person am I becoming in my communication, boundaries, and confidence? And third, what behaviors, environments, or relationships support this emerging version of me? Here's a practical tip. Keep your vision board visible but not overwhelming. So treat it like a gentle compass, not a performance checklist. Add words, textures, or symbols that represent emotional states you want to inhabit. Maybe calm, focus, curiosity, self-trust, maybe meaningful connections. Many coaching frameworks on vision boards emphasize aligning life direction with inner emotional truth rather than external pressure. Something I like to do is just keep adding to it. I start out something small, and then as time goes on and reflections and experiences, things switch. So you can even make a digital vision board that is easy to adjust and adapt. It's totally up to you. Personally, when I was in my 30s, I went through a season where I felt a little lost, like I had stepped out of the life I thought I was building after a big career, relationship, and personal shift. It was a turning point where I had to start again, not from zero, but from a quieter, more honest version of myself. Making a vision board during that time became more than a motivational exercise. It was a way of giving shape to the future I was trying to understand. I would place images and words that represented the kind of life I wanted to move towards, even when I wasn't sure what that life looked like yet. What mattered most wasn't perfection, but direction. Along the way, I pivoted many times as I learned more about my values, my energy, and what truly felt aligned with who I was becoming. I discovered that growth isn't about locking yourself into one path. It isn't linear. It's about allowing yourself to change, explore yourself, be curious, refine your vision as you gain wisdom about yourself and the world around you. That really was such a valuable lesson to me, because I grew up in thinking that everything had to be linear. You went to school, you graduated, you got a job, you got married, you had kids, and you lived happily ever after. And that wasn't my experience, and it isn't most people's experience. So learning how to pivot and change and how to rewrite my life, maybe more than one time, has been a huge eye-opener for me. And it is the identity shift that made me who I am today. So keep in mind, a vision board isn't about forcing the future. It's about giving your evolving identity a visual home, a space where your becoming can grow slowly, naturally. You can be more confident in the growth. It's less about pressure and more about possibilities. It's not about perfection. It's giving yourself the permission to evolve, to learn, to grow. Think of it as a gentle reminder that you're allowed to change. You're allowed to explore. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to step into new chapters without rushing the story of your life. All right, let's take a moment together now to breathe and settle into the idea that growth doesn't require you to have everything figured out right now. Identity shift isn't about reinventing yourself overnight. It's about allowing your life to move in the same direction as the person you're becoming. This affirmation is about giving yourself permission to change without pressure, without comparison. You don't need to stay the same to make others comfortable. So repeat after me. I am becoming. I am becoming. I am becoming. Say it slowly. The power of this affirmation is the permission it gives you. Permission to grow, to adjust, to learn. Permission to let your sense of self evolve. It's a reminder that you don't have to stay locked into old expectations or outdated versions of yourself. You're not frozen in one identity. You're allowed to learn, shift priorities, and move forward at a pace that feels honest and sustainable for your life. So here's what I want you to carry with you today. You're not a fixed photograph. You're a living story moving through different emotional seasons. As you grow, it's normal for your relationships, interests, and connections to shift too. That doesn't mean something went wrong. It means you're evolving. Some people will walk with you only for a chapter, others for a season, and the right connections will usually feel comfortable enough to grow within, not tight or restrictive. Trust the quiet wisdom inside you. Let your inner compass guide you even when the path isn't clear. Becoming more of who you truly are is not the enemy of connections with others. It's often what helps you recognize that connections are healthier and more honest when you're being true to yourself. So take care of your heart, stay curious about who you're becoming, and keep choosing a life that lets you grow without shrinking yourself to be somewhere you don't belong. Remember, I am becoming. Thank you for spending this time with me today and leaning into a conversation about identity, emotional growth, and relationships that shape how you move through the world. As we discussed today, growth often changes how we experience connections, attractions, friendships, and emotional energy. That's not something to resist. It's something to understand with curiosity and compassion. I hope this episode helps you notice where emotional misalignment or drain may quietly show up, while also making space for relationships that feel more reciprocal, emotionally safe, and supportive of who you're becoming. You can catch this episode along with our quick, thoughtful power shot insights anytime on Signals and Standards with Suzie across your favorite podcast platforms. And if today's conversation stirred a reflection, a question, an idea, or a feeling that you're ready to explore more aligned, nourishing connections as your identity evolves, you can visit powercoachsuzie.com. I truly do read every message that comes through. I'm here walking on this journey with you as you build a life and relationships that grow with you instead of holding you back. See you next time. For daily inspiration and practical advice, find me on social media at Power Coach Suzie. Got questions or ideas for the show? Head to powercoachsuzie.com where you can connect with me, explore the blog, or learn more about what I do. This is Suzie signing off. Until next time, keep reading the signals and never, ever lower your standards.